the Port Washington train line goes out to the games, and that's my town.
Cool.
So I grew up. We'd go all the time. My family was like, we don't care. You're never in trouble if you go to the Mets game by yourself. So I've been to a zillion. So it was
That's awesome.
it was a good goodbye,
Aww.
to the greatest city in the world. All right, I'm gonna do the song now on purpose, and then we're gonna start. Welcome, everybody, to Soccer Wise. David Goss, Tom Bogert with you to break down all things Major League Soccer, everything that's going on, of course, with the USMNT and the Canadian men's national team. A nice little crossover on today's show, and so much to be excited about. But we have to start with a big thank you inside the owl community, Union Omaha, recognizing Owl to Owl, which I believe are independent animals. They don't operate as a group, Tom. And yet Union Omaha has come together with us. They sent me some sweet gear. I think you have some, or it's in the mail. Whatever's happening to you, I don't care. It's not my problem. And I'm rocking it. And I just wanted to thank Union Omaha, and I wanted to throw them a quick chirp chirp.
Is that
what we're saying? I don't know. Oh yeah, that's a good point. They sent me a scarf as well.
Yeah.
See if I can get it right side up. There you go.
Hell yeah. One means all. One owl, all owls.
Shout out to Union Omaha.
I'm
stoked.
Omaha.
I love a free thing in the mail.
It's a good hat, too.
It is a good hat. Doesn't look good on me, but it's a good hat in general.
I think it looks good on you, David.
Me and Jordan did a long hat segment yesterday to start the show. This might just be our brand at this point. Tom, you didn't get a free hat, but you're gonna get one soon. How are you feeling?
I didn't. Look, I get a lot of packs. Sometimes my fiance makes fun of me because it takes me a day or two to open some of these things.
Ooh, celebrity.
And I'm just like, I get things sent or whatever. And she's just like, you're so cool, bro. I don't care.
A lifetime of happiness is what they call it. My partner likes to say, throw out those jerseys. That's the number one line I get. And I'm like, but here's the thing. What if it's 2047? And I'm looking around saying, where's my Noel Buck jersey? And I don't have it with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I would say
can't have that happen.
Yeah, my most prized possession is a TFC signed Colin Warner jersey.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That needs to be cherished. It's like a family heirloom.
Exactly. And I've pseudo adopted it as my Canadian jersey. When I'm whenever Canada's playing and I'm like, I don't have a Canadian shirt that's clean right now. That's what I go with. In those moments. Canada will be playing this weekend, as I mentioned. They'll be playing the U.S. I'm going to give you my starting lineups for those two teams. We have a fun show for this one. We have put together our tiers of superstars in Major League Soccer. So we're going to explain the tiers, and then we're going to put each of the players that deserve to be in that conversation into each of those tiers. And we've got to dig in on Atlanta. Carlos Bocanegra, the head sporting director, the chief soccer officer at that club since before it opened as an expansion team, has been let go. It is now the final piece sort of for the first real changeover in Atlanta United history, and it's occurring under Garth Lagerway. It was huge news. I think it broke probably 30 seconds after we did the show on Tuesday. That is sort of the MO. And so you can get ready for that one. Now, in speaking about news breaking after shows, we did our big NWSL show yesterday. Myself and Jordan Angeli, right after Croy Bethune. It was announced that she tore her meniscus throwing out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals game, which is brutal. And then even bigger. Yeah, absolutely brutal. And the Nationals are not even competitive. That is as bad as it gets. And then on top of that, bigger news coming down this morning with Alex Morgan announcing her retirement from the game. She will play this weekend for the San Diego Wave, and then that will be the end of her playing career. We are putting the clip together right now. We talked about Alex Morgan on our show when she wasn't announced to the Olympic roster, and we talked about first in that whole conversation the legend that she is, what she has accomplished. She is top 5 in goals and assists in NWSL history, top 10 goals, assists, appearances in U.S. women's national team history. She was on every major international competition roster for 14 years with the U.S. women's national team. She talked about it a little bit in her retirement video. Even more important to her, and I think even bigger for a lot of people with her legacy, her ability to push the game forward in this country, around the world, both the women's game as well as just the sport of soccer overall. So I think a big shout out from everyone here at Soccer Wise to Alex Morgan coming into her final game. I know a lot of people are sad after watching the video. She seems to be at peace with the decision, but it's always tough to see a legend go out. It's tough to see a legend go out in a year like this where she has struggled to score goals and hasn't really been able to find her feet, but no one's going to remember her for that. They're going to remember her for her ability to open up the game, dominate teams, and the smile she put on everyone's faces over the course of her career. So I just wanted to start with a big Alex Morgan mention before we dive back in to the Major League Soccer round. Tom, you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
Then let's talk about people getting fired. Atlanta United.
Just retirements and injuries on a baseball field for soccer players that wasn't at Yankee Stadium and NYCFC. Going retirements and now people being fired. Just a wave of positivity here on Soccer Wise.
When the Croy Bethune news dropped, I thought it was like a bit because I saw it through comment. You know what I mean? You have to like work your way back to the actual news, and then you finally get to the actual story. And you watch the video, you actually can't really tell what happens, but it is extremely unfortunate. She's one of the best players in the world right now, and that sucks. Speaking of sucks, let's talk Atlanta United. 9th place in the Eastern Conference right now. And yesterday, Garth Lagerway announcing that Carlos Bocanegra's time with the club is done. I believe his contract was up at the end of the year and choosing to make that move a little bit earlier. Bocanegra joined the team back in 2017. So he's been with the club for over 7 years at this point. The highs, 2018 MLS Cup champions in just their second year in the league, 2019 US Open Cup champions, a number of CONCACAF Champions League at the time appearances, and some big moves in and out of Major League Soccer time. You wrote it up on Give Me Sport. Talk to us a little bit about the history that Carlos Bocanegra was a part of as he was a part of this club.
Yeah, let's start with the highs. That inaugural 2017 team and 2018 when they won MLS Cup. That's just an iconic team. That was a trailblazing team. It was the best expansion side in MLS history, sports history, until I think Las Vegas Knights won the NHL Stanley Cup in their first year or whatever it was. Like, it's looking back on it now, it seems because they rewrote the book on how to do expansion, and you don't need a soft launch. Like, now it's like, oh, Nashville, they made the playoffs. Like, that's awesome. Like, good for them. Like, oh, they could be better. Or, like, do you remember what expansion teams used to be like in MLS? Right. Like, it was a joke, dude. And, like, Minnesota United came in with them. How long did it take them to, like, and that was more normal than what Atlanta did. So I think that gets lost in history because of how they changed it and how normal they've made it. So Joseph Martinez, Yalmarone, Tata Martino, that team, iconic, incredible. 2018 MLS Cup, and then it just all goes down in flames. They win 2019 Open Cup, despite of their head coach, despite of the dysfunction in that team, because Joseph Martinez was so incredibly special during that time. And then pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, it is like, this is just unrecognizable. When Joseph Martinez tore his ACL against Nashville, that was their last game, I believe, before the league shut down due to the pandemic. Joseph obviously has never been the same after complications from that torn ACL. And Atlanta United have cycled through head coaches, Frank de Boer, Gabriel Heinze, Gonzalo Pineda. Now there's an opening. Bocanegra has been there throughout it all, and it is important to look at the highs and the lows. It's just been a lot of lows lately, and that's what cost him his job in the end. They've made the 4 most expensive signings in MLS history: Thiago Almada, Pity Martinez, Ziga Barco, Alexei Miranchuk, and 5 of the top 10 with Luis Araujo in there as well. You could say one of those was absolutely a hit. Yeah. And obviously TBD on Miranchuk, like, that's just not good enough. But look, outbound transfers this summer, definitely a league record for a single window at like minimum 42 million, and a little bit extra from, sell-on clause into Zico Barco. So while the signings didn't quite work out, they weren't, all disastrous or anything. But they haven't won a playoff series since 2019. They fired Gonzalo Pineda on June 3rd, and they are once again trying to rebuild. And, I'm sure that you saw the quotes that came from Garth Lagerway's press conference, but it was super interesting to me.
Yeah, the numbers are like whiplash, right? Out the gate, the most successful team. And I think I appreciate you putting us back in the mindset of 2017 and 18, which was expansion teams can't compete in year one, especially expansion teams on the fly, Seattle had done it as being a club for 20 plus years.
Right.
And while they weren't bringing those players in, like the identity existed. The physical location already existed. Atlanta was our first one, and then LAFC followed it up really strong. And then you mentioned Nashville makes the playoffs, and we have started to see a different expectation for expansion teams now. But that Atlanta team set that model, which was you can come in big into Major League Soccer, make a splash, be competitive day one. You should be. They sort of reset the whole, oh, well, we don't have a core of players to, no, all of the pieces of, extra allocation money you get, expansion picks you have, draft picks you have, all of that should be assets that you can use and use in a positive way. Orlando and NYCFC did not do that directly before them. As you mentioned, Minnesota did not do that either. Miami didn't do that. So it was a big deal what Atlanta accomplished. Yeah. One of the things that's always been hard about Atlanta is who you give credit for these moments. Tata Martino was a part of this project pretty early. It is credit to Darren Eales and Carlos Bocanegra for convincing Tata Martino that it was a worthwhile project, bringing him in, sealing that deal. But then when you start to list part of what a sporting director's job is, which is player acquisition and roster building, you get into a lot of players that Tata has a connection to, in Miguel Almiron and Joseph Martinez and Carlos Carmona and Tito Villalba and all those players out the gate. A lot of those felt like Martino signings. Yep. Now, yeah.
I was going to say, like, I forget if it was Joseph or Miguel Almiron. Like, one of them on the record was like, I don't know where Atlanta is. Tata called me. I said yes. I didn't think about it. Right? Like, so to your point, yeah, I don't think that signing happens without Tata Martino.
Right. And so of those 4 record signings, the most successful one is one that you kind of lean credit towards someone else. But the reason they won MLS Cup was also because of Michael Parkhurst and Jeff Laurentowicz and Brad Guzan and Darlington Nagbe. And a lot of that was MLS experience that was keyed on by the club saying you need this to be successful. I don't think Tata Martino came into MLS saying, Jeff Laurentowicz is my guy. Like, I need a Jeff Laurentowicz in my team. So Carlos Bocanegra and his staff did good work on those sides of things. Since Tata has left, the biggest complaint about Atlanta has been the lack of consistent direction. That comes top down. You can talk about managers, whatever you want. All of these moves are all across the board. They are ambitious. They are exciting at times, but there is no true North Star to what is happening. And I think that's where the club has lost its feet. That's where the club has lost its ability to compete in Major League Soccer in a way that it shouldn't. Bad years for a club spending record numbers shouldn't be outside the playoffs. It should not be a club that 5 straight years doesn't win a postseason game. Bad years should be we limped into the playoffs, we won a series at least every once in a while. And I think that's where, for a lot of us, this was surprising in that it hadn't happened before. Now that Garth Lagerway has been there, but you can see Garth Lagerway now recognizing that this is his chance to put the stamp on the club, and he has to sort of take this opportunity where you've already got a coach opening. You might as well rebuild the sporting structure from the top down underneath you.
Yeah, so what I'll say is there is no surprise from me that Carlos Bocanegra has been let go by Atlanta United. I'll be honest, like, the surprise is that it hadn't happened yet. His contract is up this winter. And, like, I don't know, like, I thought it was pretty clear to me that Garth Lagerway was going to come in and get his own staff, which is normal. And to your point, like, how long it's been without a direction, without a clear philosophy, and without success. Even without a new boss, it seemed like it was time for a change, right? So, like, some of the quotes that came from Garth Lagerway in his press conference were interesting. Like, he tried, I mean, he did really well at, like, we thank Carlos for his time. Hey, it's not that we didn't believe in Carlos. It's just time to go in a different direction, right? One thing that stuck out to me, and Garth Lagerway said this in different ways over the last 18 months, he goes, for the first time in 2 years, we have the ability to truly go forward. We've cleared the decks. We have incredible possibilities. That saying, all of the contracts that you signed that I had to spend 2 years getting out of, now we can finally move forward. I would push back a little bit at the now point of it because for whatever you thought of, for whatever deficiencies that came with Yakimakis or Almada, like the DPS weren't the problem in this team.
Yeah.
It was.
Although Garth was there to sign Yakumakis, right?
That started before he, I'm pretty
Okay.
sure that,
Okay.
regardless. But, what I'm saying is Almada and Yakumakis were two really good DPs. If Miranchuk and whoever else they had this winter, and they're probably going to add two DPs this winter, if those players are as good as Almada and Yakumakis, that's a success. But then where are you? It's this foundation. That's why I was so high on them coming into the year. You looked at Stian Gregerson, Bartosz Schliess, Brooks Lennon, Caleb Wiley, Tristan Mumba, Zabad Lobajanice, John De Silva, that foundation around two top level DPs, I was like, oh, this team's going to be awesome. But they sucked. So now, while, hope springs eternal, and I understand where Garth is going, what if Miranchuk is awesome, and what if a DP9 is awesome, but, Tristan Mumba, this step back is more who he really is than who he was last year. John De Silva, since they picked up his purchase option, has just been bad. There's no two ways around it. The back line hasn't been good enough. I really like Stian Gregerson, but whatever the combination of players and Brad Guzan and goals just hasn't been good enough. So I don't know if it's as simple as just go sign a couple DPs. I hope it is, but I thought it was this winter when they had Yakumakis and Almada, and I think were two very good DPs.
I think the confusion has been there for a lot of us. The reality has been the middle of the roster has been poorer than possible to allow an Almada and Yakumakis to elevate a club in terms of performances consistently. This has been a team that's been soft to play against in central midfield basically since they lost MLS Cup. This is a team that has struggled at the center back position. They've struggled in goal as well, trying to finally replace Brad Guzan, which didn't really work out. But I think a lot of that is the players have not made sense with each other. They've brought in ball-playing center backs to play behind ball-playing central midfielders, and then no one can win a tackle, and they don't really dominate possession. And there are not clear ideas in their possession patterns. There's been a lot of misses in those places. We have a question here from Juan Garcia who says, if this was the case of clearing the deck, why get even one DP instead of staying completely fresh for a new coach? Why add Miranchuk?
Yeah, I mean, again, just use Garth Lagerway's words. He was like, we wanted, if we were going to sign DPs this summer, which we wanted to do, we wanted them to be players that were so good that they could fit with any coach. That any coach would be like, oh great, I can't wait to work with this player. So that's the argument from Atlanta on that. And they were trying to sign a second one. They were trying up until the last hours of the deadline. And they said they didn't want to compromise on, oh, we'll go down the list of our targets and hey, if we're not 1,000% convinced, we're not going to do it just because it'd be better to sign somebody now. Another thing that he said was, if we spend these resources wisely, you only have to spend them once. So I think first and foremost, that's the most important. But going back to the foundation of this roster, so Garth Lagerway's first offseason, going into the 2023 season, they let go of 20 players. And a lot of them were difficult to get out of. There was a mutual contract termination with Emerson Hyndman. He was on $1 million per season or something like that. It's crazy.
Which
Alan Franco was
probably
a DP
could have offered Darlington Nagbe, by the way.
Yeah, or re-sign Julian Gressel, or going down the list of some of these guys, right? So Emerson Hyndman, Alan Franco, he's got lost in the sands of time. That was he was a DP when he came in. He was awful. Marcelino Moreno was I don't know if I would go as far as to say he was awful, but in this system he was his skills, Araujo, all these players didn't fit with each other. It's you blindly built a roster. It's a fantasy football roster. It's just I'll try to get a few good players and we'll figure it out. It's no, these players need to play with each other. Dom Dwyer was waived. He was on 500,000 or 400,000. I don't know, who were you bidding against? Edwin Mosquera, he's the only U22 initiative player who's come good, and they spent I think a total of $8 or $9 million on Santi Sosa and Franco Ibarra. Who else? Eric Lopez, $2 million U22 initiative player, mutual contract termination.
Atlanta United 2 legend, Eric Lopez.
Joseph Martinez, they had to buy him out for him to go sign for free in Miami. Or, obviously Miami was paying him, but you know what I mean? And, that one's not the front office's fault. That comes from injuries and stuff like that. It was time, but, that's just the whole point. They used one buyout, and they had to use it on Joseph Martinez, which is a very sad story. There was, 4 other players that they could have needed to buy out, and they found a way to get off the books. So, that's kind of what Garth Lagerway was referring to when he was talking about the roster and the clean slate and being able to truly move forward.
Yeah, it is. I think if you're an Atlanta fan, you should be excited. Garth Lagerway's resume is pretty positive in Major League Soccer. He has been competitive every year he's been with the club. He has won a ton of things. I think the reason you bring in Moranchuk is he understands what wins in MLS. He knows Moranchuk is good enough. And he knows the deal is there and possible. Look at Columbus. Wilfred Nonce was not there. They signed Cucho because Cucho's a no-brainer. And then that next coach is going to work with that. It maybe isn't perfect, but it is. If you can get the deal done, you get that deal done because Garth Lagerway knows that a good manager should be able to work with those assets and should be able to create a winner with all of that. On Carlos Bocanegra's side, by the way, I don't know that a lot of people are going to be banging down his door, but he's got the resume for Atlanta. So I would not be shocked if he resurfaces over the next year in conversations. Chicago's going to be an obvious one people are going to connect him with. They've got a sporting director opening. I don't know a lot of what I see from Atlanta being the fix for him to go to Chicago, but I would expect to start to see his name in those conversations over the next year. On the Atlanta side, you put in the Give Me Sport piece, which was the first thing I thought, which is that Chris Henderson, who famously was super successful under Garth Lagerway in Seattle, who is now in Miami and has had a new boss brought in above him, could be earmarked for this position. I think for me, the sell here is that everyone has been elevated one spot. Garth was the chief soccer officer in Seattle, and Chris worked under him. Garth is now president, and Chris would be the chief soccer officer at this club under Garth Lagerway. That's the pitch here for him, which is you're not taking a step back. It's sort of a step sideways into a comfortable position where you could be pretty successful.
Yeah, and look at, so Chris Henderson's a CSO in Inter Miami, and I think he's done a phenomenal job. But right now, ownership, Jorge Mas and David Beckham, there's two different owners doing deals. There's Tata Martino, who has a ton of sway that he's earned, and good sway that comes with it, like some of the players that they've signed, like we just talked about with Atlanta, wouldn't be possible without Tata. But what comes with that is a lot of control from the head coach. And then you have the orbit of Lionel Messi. So it's not like Chris Henderson has a clean slate to be building this roster himself. He's doing, again, an awesome job. And I'm sure he's crying that he has to deal with Lionel Messi, Sergio Busquets, and having to sign Luis Suarez on a non-DP deal, right? Like, that's all fair. But just, I think that would be another way to be like, hey, one, like, you won't have to deal with all these others. Just deal with me. And, like, me and you have worked together, and we have a good relationship.
100%.
So, another thing that a nugget that I had in that piece, so their new president of football operations, he took over this summer.
Miami.
He comes in, he's doing interviews, he's talking, I didn't come here to replace Henderson. We have a good relationship because he was at Real Zaragoza before, which is owned by Mas. So it's like, I know Chris. I'm so excited. Came here to work with him. That's like, all of that, right? The same day, he physically moved into Chris Henderson's office and told Chris Henderson to go somewhere else. Like, and then another thing, this is when I was at The Athletic, we did an article. Paul Tenorio was the one who interviewed him, but we did the article kind of together. And the quotes, they sound beautiful. It's like talking about, I look at myself as a conductor of the orchestra. You got the scouting department here playing beautiful music and the sporting director there and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, man, like, I like it a little bit corny, but that, like, it's cool. Like, I'm not going to be so jaded. And then another one of our colleagues that works in Spain was like, look at this. And he sent us his introductory interview with the guy. It was almost, I swear to God, word for word, the same quote that he did at Zaragoza. I was like, oh, so the two things I know about this guy is he just copies and pastes interviews that he's doing, and that he made Chris Henderson move out of his office. So I was like, I'm not starting off on the right foot here.
Not ideal. I think if you're someone like Chris Henderson, this is an ideal spot. Chris, by the way, has connections to South Florida. He played there. He's got family down there. So that's a draw as well. It's the same reason Garth Lagerway took this job. Atlanta has an ability to be a unique Major League Soccer club. The records you talked about in spending, the market they are in, and the market's relevance globally, and the size of the market, and the relevance of the club inside that market, and the structure that's been built. Like Garth said it in the interview. I think we can both tell you it's probably the best training facility in the league. In a league where training facilities are a recruiting tool for players around the world because they're better here than they are at the top clubs in the world. So like all of this is stuff that Chris didn't have in Seattle. It is stuff that Miami is developing in some ways, but you talked about in it's like Miami is in an insane place where you can't really run the club. If you are someone, and Chris and Garth both are, who believe in Major League Soccer, who believe in the sport in this country and want to build something special, Atlanta is the spot to do it. And now you've got this opening, you've got this other opportunity. We've got this opportunity. The other name that popped in my head immediately when this happened was Greg Berhalter. And like I have assumed since the start of him potentially not being USMNT manager all the way a year and a half ago till now, that when you talk about Greg's move if he stays in MLS or goes to MLS, that he has the weight to ask for the head coach GM double position if he wants to.
Garth Lagerway was asked directly on the coaching search and stuff like that. Is there a possibility for it to be a dual title? And he was like, absolutely no chance. Like we believe really strongly that those two jobs need to be separate. So if Berhalter is insistent on having the CSO title as well, Atlanta won't be the place. But that's not to say that he wouldn't have a ton of sway.
Yeah. I have also heard that Greg may not want that if he does come into an MLS club. But funny things happen when people have opportunity and power and there's a vacuum. And we'll sign Greg, then we'll sign the CS. You know what I mean? Like all of this stuff has funny ways of working out.
Good point.
And at a minimum, you could look at something and say, if Chris Henderson's not available or doesn't want to leave or isn't going to come, do you get someone less senior as the quote unquote CSO who operates alongside Greg underneath Garth Lagerway? Because all of this is unique, right? Garth being a team president as a actual CSO in his background isn't something that's happened much in Major League Soccer. It's him and Tim Bezbachenko. That's it. So like you don't need the same type of person in that role specifically if you don't want to. Greg, Garth has said that they're also not ready to make the move on coach. So it seems like we're all kind of in this waiting, holding pattern at this point. It would be interesting, is all I would say. I have said a million times on the show, I think Greg's a really good coach. He's super smart. He's thought very highly of. And it would be a clean fit for him in this spot to sort of take things over for the first time going forward. Any other big Atlanta thoughts? Any other names we should think of? Any other specifics, things we should look at with this club over the final month or two of the season?
It's a good question. On the coaching search, they said that they're talking to candidates. I did directly ask about the Patrick Vieira reports, and as expected, no comment, more or less. They're not going to comment on specific candidates, but that would make sense to me. I'd heard Patrick Vieira's name connected with the club when Vieira was still at Strasbourg, honestly. It was like, hey, like, if he, and like, obviously Pineda still had a job, but like, like, this marriage would make, like, if Vieira was to come back to MLS, like, this would make sense to me. But I'm not confirming anything like with sources. I'm just saying that just deductive reasoning and some little bits of info I've heard over the last year or two, this would make sense. And then, as for this season, like Lagerway was saying the right things of, our goal is still to make the playoffs this year, all this. And like, like I'm sure it is. And I'm sure that that's also what you have to say so that it's not like a deadbeat end of the season, but like, can't even. Like Lagerway said last year when they actually seemed like they might be pretty good, he was like, great. Like we finished 5th and made the playoffs. Like, let's, have a trophy celebration. Like, that's not what we do here. Like what we're here for is to win actual trophies. Like, I don't care that we made the first round. Like, that's the bare minimum. So that was a team that was better than this last year and seemed to be building towards something. So like, again, this year, like, maybe they finish 8th or 9th. Maybe they win the play-in game. Like, and then they lose in round 1. Like, that's not to be super dismissive of it, but it's like, like that's an important goal to make the playoffs this year. But the most important is to continue into the winter with more flexibility and get all these hires right and these DP signings right.
We, our friends at American Soccer Analysis crunch the numbers on percentages for playoff teams, and going further than that, we have Atlanta at a 66% chance of making the postseason. And a 47% chance of of making the play-in, and a 47% chance of making the postseason, because the assumption being they will be in ninth place. If they make it, they would be the away team. Then they would have to win a game to get to the next stage. And either way, it feels like it's going to be a letdown year for Atlanta. I think for Atlanta fans, the hope is sort of starting to bloom. And there's been some good performances from some of these attacking pieces. And we're going to dig into some of these names as we go forward, because we're going to talk superstars now in Major League Soccer. Tom, this was your birth child. You are a superstar in my heart. You are the conductor of all of this, and I am the scouting department, so you can have my office whenever you need it and whenever you want it. Tom, get us started here on sort of how we're breaking down these tiers, and then we can start to dig into some of the names that we put on.
Yeah, so just in a macro sense, soccer is a weak-link sport in that it's more important for the collective to be really good than to have, several bad players and 3 stars, right? Like the NBA is a strong link sport because stars can be dominant, and stars can be dominant in soccer, but it's more collective. But going in towards the playoffs, when you look at some of these teams, when they match up, who's going to have the best player on the field and where do they stack up? Like we say things like elite or top 5 or really good or whatever, right? Some of these words that all right, let's dig in deeper and try to really make a bit of a hierarchy or tiers for the best players in the league. So that was kind of the idea here. It was mostly for the playoff teams, but then as Goss and I were talking, it would have felt weird to just leave out some teams below the playoff lines. But I think that this is most useful as we're coming towards the playoffs in another month and a half or whatever. So getting into the tiers, I broke it down to superstar and star tiers, and then there's a little bit in there because I think superstar we have to be careful with how many names are on that list.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up with 7. We ended up with 7, I believe, if you're co-signing that. So you didn't raise any qualms on this part of it in the pre-show meeting. So if you spring this on me now, I'll be a little sad.
I'm going to do it.
The first, you disagree with this one. The first tier is tier Messi. It's Lionel Messi because he's the greatest player of all time. It might be easy to forget because we haven't seen him play in MLS in several months because of international duty and injury. He's got 12 goals and 13 assists or whatever. He's got 25 goal contributions in 12 games. He had 5 assists in one half against the New York Red Bulls. Don't let these things become normal or normalized. Lionel Messi is a tier of his own, with no disrespect for some of these other wonderful players we're going to get to.
So I obviously agree with you. This is an easy one. This inspired me to name the tiers after players, but I don't want the other ones. But a Messi tier works in the Messi is not a name anymore, right? Messi, his name has become a phrase. And so, if you're in the Messi conversation, if you're in the Messi tier, everyone is the maritime Messi, whatever it is. So I'm saying this to the fans. I don't have names for the other tiers. I would like assistance so that we can come back and name these tiers. So, if it's the Diego Valeri tier, if it's the Shalry Joseph tier, whatever you want to name them, help me with this. We'll workshop. If you don't subscribe to the Patreon, do it so you can jump into the Discord and talk it through with me, and then we'll come back. But in the Messi tier, shockingly, Messi stands alone.
Yeah. Well, so that's the whole thing. I'm not... You try to get super creative. David Goss, the poet sitting by his window, just thinking
when you're
about
conducting, you got to pull me back in because I'm ready for my solo. I'm Nick Cannon on the drums.
So I just did these by tier A, B, C, because I think that's the easiest way to kind of go through this. And I'm open to adding player names, MLS player names to these tiers, but don't get confused. Tier Messi is just out of respect to Messi.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's Messi, 1 of 1. Respect. He's the top. Tier A, so in any other time period in MLS that does not have Lionel Messi. Right. Tier A, for me, it's Cucho Hernandez, Lucho Acosta, and Denny Bouanga.
Yeah.
I think the 3 of them stand above everybody else right now.
These 3 stand above in that they are, as individuals, the 3 best players in the league besides Messi. Mm-hmm. As an effect on a team, they are a cheat code and a win button in every single game they play. And they are that on teams that perform at a high level and go far. Because part of what we're going to talk about as we go through this is there are other players in this league who are to their team similar. Those teams are not as good or as competitive. And not all of that falls on one person, but Cucho came to a team that didn't make the playoffs, and then they became an MLS Cup winner. Lucho has played on the field with groups for Cincinnati that have no business being in a supporter shield race, and he has elevated them and carried them. And Bouanga, we talked about through it all. Playoffs, Leagues Cup, whatever. If he's on the field, you have a chance. You don't need other attacking pieces, and he has done so. I love that he's just the cyborg now. He has done so at a consistency level that is unheard of. All three of these are must-watch. They're big-ticket items. They are the reason you go to the game. They're the reason you watch, and they are winners. I completely agree with you on this category. I thought this was the cleanest one to do because all three of them fit it so perfectly.
Yeah, and I think you put it really well, the win button and the fact that they're dragging their teams to wins when, they don't always, totally deserve it on the merit of play, and that's why you have to have a strong foundation, and then you can have special players that can do special things, and when you just brute force you to points. Like, to your point about Lucho Costa, like, he had that run early in the spring and early summer where I think he contributed to like 70% of Cincinnati's goals, and they had won, 10 in a row or 10 or 11, whatever it was. Like, that's the one where I look at with like, yeah, like this was not a team that really should have been in the Shield contention. Like when Miazga went down, the lack of getting anything from Bupenza, and everything else that this team has run into this year. I think they're a really good team. Lucho Costa kept them in the Shield race for way longer than I think that they should have been, given how strong the top of the league is. So again, like credit to like Lucho Costa, like one of the very, very best players in the league, and Danny Bouanga. I think particularly last year when they were winning games, like really winning games in transition LAFC, and they were playing every 3 days, and he's the only person who doesn't have fatigue or wear and tear. And like, there's just some games where it's like, oh my god, like I don't think LAFC played that well, but Bouanga just beat 3 people and scored, and they won 1-0. Like, what do we make of this?
The Seattle game in the playoffs last year is like the whole model of they had 30% possession on the road against Seattle. They had one chance. He created it himself. He scored it himself, and they won the game.
Yeah, so those are the 3 in Tier A, and then the last tier for Superstar before we get to Stars. So Superstar tier, Tier B, Chicho Arango, Ricky Puig, and Carlos Hill.
Yeah. This one, obviously, these 3 names are below the other 3. This one was a little bit tougher for me to get around. I think Chicho is the cleanest one in this, of like when he's been on the field, his performances, he is both an elite chance creator and goal scorer right now. RSL, I think he has elevated, and like he is the clear star of the team as well. There are not other stars in that way where it's like, oh, if Chicho's out, obviously I love Andres Gomez, RIP. Obviously I love Diego Luna, who we'll talk about coming up in a little bit about elevating into this conversation in the future. But like Chicho stands there alone. Carlos Heel has the history, helps set the points record, has been consistent year in and year out. Ricky Puig is the tough one because part of this.
Don't be a nerd.
Part of this for me is winning, and like
they're winning. They're first in the West.
So this year would be the change. But he has been in the league. They won 1 postseason series. They've not made the playoffs otherwise. But he is, the reason I'm convinced is he is so ubiquitous on the game. He leads the league all the time in touches, passes, everything. That he is a central force upon himself that no one else in MLS is. And therefore, not just the flair and the quality and the ability for him, but just the consistent nature that he affects the game elevates him into this. But he's a tough one for me because, as I said, they weren't great as a team. They've gotten better, but they've gotten better with other names you're going to talk about. And so, like, for me, it's tough to say you're a superstar because after you get another superstar, you've performed better. That's not exactly how that works. Like, that is...
No. Okay, Lucho Costa. They finished. Cincinnati finished bottom of MLS with Lucho Costa. It wasn't his fault. Doesn't make him less of a player. Like, he couldn't overcome that. Nobody could overcome the Cincinnati stank of their first couple years. Like, Ricky Puig had Douglas Costa on one side of him, and one good season of Chicharito, and one bad season and one injured season. What's he supposed to do with that?
Not a ton, but also Lucho won with Brenner on the way out and Brandon Vasquez on the way out and Nobu Penza. And like He won in tough situations with FC Cincinnati in which Ricky didn't win.
Billy Sharp got signed by the Galaxy as a free agent last year and was immediately their best forward.
Billy
And like
Sharp,
Ricky
Sharp,
Pooch was
Sharp,
like, "Oh, I have
Sharp,
somebody
Sharp,
I can
Sharp.
pass the ball to." Like, are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
I get what you're saying, but also we're talking about levels. The Galaxy didn't even make the playoffs. Like, we're not asking him to be a Supporter Shield winner. I'm just saying elevate the team and make them competitive. If he wasn't on the team last year, they'd be brutal to watch. They'd be miserable. They'd probably have finished somewhere similar in the standings, how far down they were. So that's what I'm talking about.
Cucho, okay, so again, I'm gonna keep pointing to Lucho Acosta finished last in MLS with Cincinnati, and if you took him off that team, it couldn't have been any worse because of they were worse played. Like again, it wasn't. He was a rare bright spot for that team. Cucho, like he only had a half season. They missed the playoffs in his half
Oh,
season.
come on. He came in at the end of the year. That was fake. That doesn't count as Cucho.
They were over the playoff line after I believe they beat Chicago in like one of his first games, and he had a couple goals, like, and we were all like, "Oh my god, this guy's awesome!" Oh, they're definitely gonna make the playoffs because they're great because they have him and Lucas Arreon, and then they didn't. Like, I don't think it's his fault, but like, yeah, but and the reason and that's the reason why Ricky Pooch is in Tier B for me rather than Tier A. Like, I don't think that he's those Tier A guys, but I think he's a superstar in this league. Like, MLS leaders in touches is Ricky Pooch with 2649. Next is Marky Delgado with 400 less, and Marky Delgado's played like 300 more minutes. Like, he is such a singular talent, and it can be frustrating because he kind of goes outside of the tactics. He drifts. Like, it's difficult for the midfielders behind him, and he's contributed to some of their, particularly last year, contributed to some of their deficiencies in transition defense. But like, I like that doesn't take away from all the incredible creativity, possession, and just special moments that he has.
He's the James Harden of MLS. It's a fact. It's a fact. He's the beard. But James Harden is still a Hall of Famer.
James Harden tweet a lot?
Yeah. I think he did back in the day. Then he'd be the Kevin Durant. If Ricky's going to keep that up and start subtweeting people, he would be the Kevin Durant of Major League Soccer. And quite honestly, Slim Reaper might work for him. Not as tall,
I love it,
but a similar build otherwise for Ricky. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with having him in here. I love that you landed on the conversation of how much he affects the game. Like, that sort of was what pulled me back, was like, if you are the guy that everything goes through all the time, you are a superstar. Even if, because I kind of looked through those lists and was like, is there a center mid or center back that I don't think of in that way? Most of it's system based. The Galaxy and Houston dominate possession. They pass a million times. Like, that's Artur is going to get on this list. Mikhail's going to get, not on this list, on that list. Those guys are not in this convo, but Ricky isn't, and I'm fine with it. Although, now you're going to get to the next list. It makes me want to elevate some people into this conversation. Go.
I'm just gonna say, I feel strongly that there's seven players right now in the superstar tiers, and I take the term superstar very, very seriously. And just because we didn't talk about Chicho there, I want, like, Chicho Arango. I think even this time last year, I think I would have put him in the star tier, somewhere down here. Like, awesome forward, goal scorer, you love it. Like what he was doing when he was with LFC, even before he came back to MLS with Real Salt Lake. Why he's a superstar is because he's been such a complete forward, and particularly this year, he's been. Like, I wasn't familiar with your game in that, like, he wasn't asked to do that for LAFC. Part of the reason why Steve Cherundolo seemed like he wanted to bench him all the time was that he wasn't doing enough outside of scoring goals. And this version of Chicho at Real Salt Lake is just awesome to see. So, moving on, Tier C, and this is where, again, we break to star and not superstar. Tier C, for me, Evander, Gabriel Peck, Hector Herrera, Facundo Torres, and Christian Benteke, Air Benteke. He should be his own tier just because of the aerials, but I digress.
Okay, Benteke was our last one in this, full disclosure, because we struggled with the fact that, like, DC don't make the playoffs, they might not make it again, and it's hard. Christian Benteke is must watch. People tune in for him. He has star name quality, obviously, for what he's done outside of Major League Soccer. He's then come into MLS and dominated, and he does so with everyone on the field. Like, you could throw us out there, and he probably gets one at some point. Obviously, you're in the superstar tier. I'm in the star tier, so it's like not a bad matchup for him, or not a bad set of three, but he's like in there for that, and I'm okay with that. The other ones you named, I had split into two different categories. Gold is clearly in this. Like, when you go through the numbers, when you go through the watching the game and the vibes, like he is the face of that team. That team is top 5 consistently now in the West. They are the Canadian champions. They might be a 3-time reigning Canadian champion at the end of this. He just got called back into Scotland, which, as I said, worst team to watch in the world. And he has played different roles for them. Like he has elevated his game in which where whoever's missing, he will step up and do the job. He can cover ground central midfield. He can score goals. He can create chances from the top or from deeper. He's awesome. He also is consistent and works hard at all of these things.
Yes.
He's what? The working man's MVP?
Working man's MVP.
Was what the Vancouver was sending out to all of us, which I don't blame you
That
for
worked on
trying.
you so well. That campaign
I was
worked
already
so
in
well
the bag. I was a waste of a giveaway on that one.
Nah, you gotta reward your base. You gotta reward your base.
True. You gotta keep me coming back just in case. Driussi's tough because that team is not great.
We haven't even gotten to that tier yet. 2D.
Are we not in that tier? What tier?
We're
did
in tier
you
C.
say?
Evander, Peck, Herrera, Facundo Torres.
Oh my
Benteke.
god! I'm in a whole.
Did you think that?
Yeah.
So you heard Benteke. I guess that was an executive choice by me to
to move him up a tier. Yeah.
So what else? So you're arguing that Gold should be in tier C?
I wasn't doing that, but I'm okay to do that because I literally.
So you were arguing that he should be in tier D where we listed him. That was what your argument was?
I was talking through tier
D.
Yeah.
Stop disagreeing with me when I agree with you.
I like Gold in tier C. I think he should be. So the other ones are Evander, Ache, Peck, and Facundo Torres, right?
Yeah.
With Benteke. Yeah.
I
think Gold
so I agree. I think, we'll edit this on the fly. Gold.
Yes.
tier C.
Wow. Look at us. Good. Look how fluid we are. Look at how based we are. I love this. Evander, I said last year would be in this conversation. He is. If he stays in MLS, I wouldn't be shocked if he moves up a tier over the course of the next year. His combination of skill, vision, and physicality is unique. It's what allowed him, I think, to start so quickly in MLS because the physical part is one of the hardest parts to get to for 10s, and he's already there. Ache is the one I would argue could be in the next conversation, the one up. When we talked about Ricky being the central force, touches, dominant, and part of that being system-based, Ache is the system for Houston. Like, it was built because it's what he likes to do, and it gets the best out of him. And then they went to a Western Conference Finals because of him. And, like, there are other names for Houston that we like and we can talk about. No one else is in this conversation for Houston.
Yeah, I agree.
And so if they're going to make a second run, it's hard to take Ache out of that. And I would argue the word superstar, Hector Herrera is in there. With what he did with Porto, with his history, with his background, captain of the Mexican national team, you could make him the 8th member of the superstar category, both for his performance on the field and what he means to the game.
Yeah, I understand your argument. I'd still push back on that just because, like, I do think that Chicho, Carlos Hill, and Ricky Puig are in a slightly different category than him. Like last year, I think he had 16 assists. This year hasn't been quite the same. I know that he missed time early in the season. He's still been excellent. But I just kept coming back to, like, contributing more goals, whether it's goals or assists. Kind of like, again, like tier C, like theoretically he's somewhere between the 8th and 12th best player in MLS. So this isn't a slight. This is a celebration of Hector Herrera. I just wouldn't go as far as putting him in, like, the top 7.
You got to love when someone subs someone and then they go, this is for you. I'm doing this for you. This is an honor for you. Ache right now, 8th for shooting chances created per 90 in Major League Soccer. Literally right behind Ricky. Like, yes, we are talking about 7 and 8 in this, which I think is fine. Like, if you want to have a line and we have a line there, I'm okay with that. I'm not going to complain about that. I would say I like that we put Gald in here.
Me too.
Facundo Torres is tough because he's inconsistent.
Yeah.
He's the best player on a team that won an Open Cup. He's the best player on a team that was second in the East last year. They are struggling this year. It doesn't feel like he carries teams when they're bad. Like, it feels like he plays to the level they play at. And when they're good, he's great. And when they're bad, he's poor. But he's also the youngest player in this conversation. And that's just, like, part of what's going to happen in all of that.
Gabriel Peck would be.
Is Peck younger than him?
Yeah.
I thought Peck was 24. And Facu is as well?
I thought Gabriel Peck was a little younger than that.
Don't you love when we just Google people on this show? So, yeah, that's fair. Also, Peck's not the best player on his team.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And like that's the part that's hard in all of this. Is
Yeah, and
when you're the
exactly.
second guy, what does it mean? But he's unplayable right now in year one, and he will be better next year because no one gets worse from that level on in MLS. And at that point, we'll be glad we had him in here.
Yeah, I think your points on Facundo Torres are well taken as well. So particularly with him, and that's why I am glad that we have Gald in that same tier because like I think Gald has the higher floor, more consistent, more reliable, while still being obviously a really, really, really good player. I think Facundo Torres, while he's not as consistent as Ryan Gald, I think that he can hit a slightly higher level than Gald can. So I think
Yeah.
it makes sense that they're both in the same tier here.
Okay, cool. We feel good.
Tier D. Sebastian Driussi, even though he hasn't been so good since 2022, hasn't been so great. So maybe we'll edit this one on the fly as well. But Driussi, Santi Rodriguez, Diego Rossi, and Emil Forsberg, MIA somewhere. He not only is he missing games, he missed Scandinavian night at Red Bull Arena last weekend. So there's that. Hopefully we see him again soon. I thought he was gonna be back from his injury by now, but hopefully we see him again soon.
Agreed. Hopefully, we see him again soon. He was our last add into this after talking about this and debating it a little bit. And to me, what we saw from him in the first half of the year was in the tier C convo. And like, so, okay, he hasn't been fully healthy. He hasn't been as consistent. We also haven't seen it as long. So I don't
Yeah.
want to credit him for like a flash, but we've seen it across his career.
Yeah.
He is one of the guys, if he's healthy in a playoff series, you could say the Red Bulls have a chance in every match because he's on the field, whether it's goals or creation. He fits with a lot of different guys because he's a high-level player, and he is the best player we have seen play for the Red Bulls in 10 years now, right? Like coming out of the Sasha Kljestan BWP years.
Yeah.
He's the best player we've seen play for that team, and the team reacted that way. They went from, we'll make the playoffs every year to we're a top four team. We are a home playoff team. We're an Eastern Conference contender, like all those things. So I think that puts him in there. Driussi's tough because he's had his peaks and his falls, and he is not a dominant player. He does not affect the game all the time.
No.
And so if you take the team out of it, he falls out of it. He doesn't really dictate what the team does. But I think as a capable soccer player, he's on a level that's different than a lot of other guys in the league. And that's what pushes him in here. And the other two were Santi Rodriguez and Diego Rossi, right?
Yeah.
So these two were the toughest for me. For Santi, he's never been the best player on his team. And when he has been, they haven't been good. So he was on the cup team. He was phenomenal. Tati leaves. The next year, Maxi is still there. He has a good year. Maxi leaves. He has an okay year. The team doesn't make the playoffs. Maxi comes back this year. He's been a lot better. That is hard for me to gauge in terms of like you are a star. And you carry a team and you carry, you set the tone and all those things. And that's where he was a little bit difficult for me. The problem is I think Diego Rossi belongs in this, and Diego Rossi has never been the best player on his team. His teams have been slightly better on average than Rodriguez. And I'm splitting hairs here. Diego Rossi, the year Vela didn't play in 2020, basically didn't play. LAFC sucked. They didn't make the playoffs. Rossi won the Golden Boot. 2020 was weird, so there's that. But at least Rossi showed his individual performance remained at a high level without the other best player on the field the one time we've seen him play there. And my guess is if Cucho moves on, he will be that guy in Columbus, and we'll learn more about that going forward. But I think Rossi, with his resume, deserves to be here 100%. Santi, I think, is the toughest one in this group.
Yeah, I think we just fundamentally disagree on this. Like, I think Maxi Morales is very important for NYCFC, but I think Santi Rodriguez is their best player pretty unquestionably. Like, I think that they work well together, and they make, like, particularly Maxi makes Santi better. But like, this is Santi's team for me, and like, so I'm giving him credit for being the best player on a team that's in fifth place right now in the Eastern Conference. So, your point with Rossi, I think he could be the best player on several other teams in MLS. Like, I'm not gonna knock him because he's playing next to Cucho Hernandez and how awesome that partnership is. So, for me, I think that's tier D, and we'll keep it moving here to tier E. The last one we have, there's a lot of things going in different directions here. So, we added a couple goalies on this. Andre Blake. I'm gonna add Roman Berkey as well because I think he should be there as well. Darlington Nagbe, just absolute legend. Didn't know what to do with Olivier Giroud and Luis Suarez, so we put him here because it would have felt weird to leave him out. But like, are they really that
Yeah.
much higher? I don't know. Luca Orieno, and then Colorado Rapids duo Georgi Mihailovic and Rafa Navarro, who like I think is legitimately really good.
Yeah, I think he is too. Colorado's an interesting one, right? Team is the star. Like, how do you get anyone in here? Who do you put in? Cole Bassett's probably bouncing around this conversation at the bottom end as well, which like takes away from all of them, but adds to all of them. I think by the end of the year, if Miami wins the Shield, Busquets or Suarez will elevate past this category if Messi plays as much as he plays. Like, that's the hard part with Suarez. He also hasn't been there a ton, but like this team's rolling. And like Suarez is the name and he is scoring goals. In Busquets is the tone setter and like everything runs through him and all those types of things. So those guys are really, really hard. But the other ones I liked in this, Nagby's a guy who's never been the best player on his team. He's won a ton. He's always crucial, but we're probably dropping into the category of like guys that aren't the best players on their team all the time being in this, especially having two Rapids guys on this level. But I thought Rafa Navarro's probably the best like MLS player right now in this conversation. Not just for his team, but like overall with his performance.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'd probably lean with like Suarez or whatever, right? But or Orieno when he's kind of picking up the slack with Cincy and some of those incredible goals that he's had.
Yeah.
Another name I want to add to this that I forgot to, Christian Espinoza, San Jose Earthquakes. He's just been awesome for several years. Really consistent. He doesn't have the same heights as maybe, Evander, right? Or even Facundo Torres, but like he's just been so good for San Jose, despite them being the bottom team in the league right now. But I think he deserves to be in this tier.
You mentioned Berkey. We have a comment in the chat saying Marcel Hartl will be in this conversation in a year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if there was a St. Louis player in here next year. I don't even know that it's Hartl. It might be Lovin with like all the pieces around him and what he does. If Klaus stays healthy with now the increased quality around him, it could be him. But like, I wouldn't be shocked based off what we've seen in the short time if there is a St. Louis player in this conversation going forward. You mentioned Christian Espinoza. He's one of those where it's like he can't elevate a team by himself. I think very few people could elevate these San Jose teams. His numbers individually are up there. His consistency is up there as well. I wouldn't be shocked if Hernan Lopez gets in this convo if this team can like flip around and become competitive because he is like for real fun to watch.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then like that's what like because I think that this category feels a little stretched. Like again, it'd be I'm glad that we have the names we do, but then it's like now we're getting closer to the pack of like what's a really good player versus what's a star tier. And like you said, like there are a bunch of other like Lovin, yeah, like all right, like if you have Nagby in there, like so maybe Lovin, another kind of central midfielder, and then you kind of go on down the list, and like we didn't even have any center backs here because I think that it's been a bit of a weak year for center backs. But like 2 years ago, Walker Zimmerman is definitely in one of these tiers, right?
Yep.
Like Aaron Long pre-injury as well, and not to say that these are bad players or anything anymore, but like I just don't think that we have a dominant center back right now in the league.
Yeah, and some center backs set the tone for the way their team plays. I don't know that I feel that there's a team that's elite in Major League Soccer right now who has one of those players. Miazga probably would have been in this convo last year as well with like what he brought Cincinnati and the way they win.
Yeah.
He's not in that, and we did the Defensive Player of the Year talk last show and sort of said it's kind of a thin one this year. Hani Mukhtar, we haven't mentioned yet. As like an individual soccer player, he's up there. He's not right now. Like this is
It's been a year too. Like this isn't just. I mean, it's been since
last
Leagues Cup break last year.
Yeah. So September 5th, 2024. He's not on this list. Things are tough in Nashville, and it has been tough for him as well. I think the big name you're leaving out that everyone wants to talk about right now is the touch man himself, Pep Biel. Like the man who dominates the game like no one else in Major League Soccer. Justice for Pep Biel, which goes to what I want to close us on. I feel good about these tiers. I feel good about this list. I'm sure we missed one huge name that everyone's going to come screaming at us for. But also, I think it's going to change, of course. From who we have in Major League Soccer right now, who do you think gets into this, or who would you want to? AKA, who do you love watching and say if they can elevate or be consistent or whatever, they'll be a part of this convo?
Yeah, I mean, I look at some of the new signings this summer, like Bukhari and Ranchuk, like those are obvious just with the fees paid for those players. Hernan Lopez, you named him already. And then in terms of like young players like Diego Luna, well, is there another leap to take now that Andres Gomez is gone? And, again, he's been really, really good. Can he go from really, really good to a star?
Yeah, I like those names. Pedar Musa, I think.
Oh my God, yeah, good shout.
He's been Benteke.
He's on the
with
cusp.
the way. Yeah, he's obviously a big man, so you think of that, but like the way he moves, the way the game looks easy for him when he gets any half chances, and he looks to have gotten up to speed. He feels like one.
Yeah,
Bukhari.
Great shout.
Bukhari's one I want to. Like when I watch him play, it's like if he pulls this stuff off enough that he's great, this is going to be the most fun player to watch in this league. So I want him to get there, and he's one of those players that you want. Liel Abada, we've talked about Goss Theorem like favorite coming into next year. He's one that I think will get there. Ty Baribo is probably close to like almost Carranza conversation already with his bounce back in year 2 and the goals he's scoring. The one I want more than any is Diego Luna.
Yep.
And if he does what he did the first half of this year for the next year and a half, like he will be. RSL will be that competitive. He will be the second best player alongside Chicho on that team. He's got the potential to do it. It would be awesome to have a young American player in that conversation. It would be awesome to have a player like him and his personality and everything he brings in that as well. So I think those are the names we're looking at right now to get in there going forward. You never know what happens. Obviously open to a bunch of other signings coming up as well. Let's roll through here to some national team. You feel good about your tiers? You ready to get a bunch of weird name suggestions that I'm going to enforce on us going forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is the type of energy I love from my superstar. Tier A right there from Tom. USA versus Canada coming up on Saturday in Kansas City. And then the U.S. playing New Zealand and Canada going to play Mexico in the games after that one. It will be Jesse Marsh's first game against his former job because he was an assistant coach for the USMNT, and he has, 2 caps, I think, as a player as well. So it's going to be a hard moment for him to lead the Canadian Maple Leafs out onto the field against the Stars and Stripes and the red, white, and blue in this one. And it's a big game for both because I talked about it on Tuesday. You're not getting a lot of chances to have high-intensity moments anymore because you don't have World Cup qualifying for these two countries. And, I can guarantee Jesse's going to be riled up in the locker room. I think these Canadian players are going to be riled up. They think they're the kings of CONCACAF. They won World Cup qualifying. They went the deepest at Copa America. They think they deserve respect, and they don't get it. They get a chance to go out on the field in the U.S. against the U.S. That's an opportunity for them. And this U.S. team wants to bounce back from what happened at the Copa America. Tom, I've got lineups for these two teams that I want to see before we get there. Any big thoughts for you of what you're looking for, what you want to see, what you hope to be talking about next Tuesday on the show?
I could reiterate my disappointment that they couldn't get the Pochettino deal over the line ahead of this window. Just like you said, there are going to be minimal games of consequence before the World Cup. There are minimum windows. This is a finite runway for a new coach and new staff to evaluate players, to start to put in principles of game models and what they want to do. This is a window that could have gone towards that foundation. And starting against Canada, I think it would have been an awesome test. I think that would have been a great, as you said, the intensity is going to be there. Definitely on the Canadian side, should be on the American side too, because while Pochettino won't be coaching the team, it is a transition era. Everybody should be feeling a clean slate. And if you were out of favor a little bit under Berhalter, then okay, this is my chance, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's a friendly with an interim manager once again, and I've seen too many games, too many friendlies with an interim manager for my good for several years here. So hopefully Pochettino's here for a long time, and if he's not, his successor's named pretty quickly because I'm done with what is this, our third interim manager in the last 18 months? Give me. I
just did a quick search to see what Dave Sarakin was doing right now. Do you know what he's doing?
Is he North Carolina? Where is he?
No, Wikipedia says, so take this for the grain of salt. He is the assistant manager at Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Oh my God, yes!
I didn't even know this. I didn't know this was part of his life because I thought he was the Puerto Rico coach still.
Oh my God!
So I did not know that was what he did. Charlie Trout,
USL. We had Puerto Rico national
Yeah.
team. We had assistant in Israel. What? That's awesome. That we there's so many different options here.
He's living
Sorry.
a life. He's living the dream. He's out there in the world. He's doing the Bob Bradley light lifestyle as he goes along. Yep, I like that you reiterated your disappointment. That is like that is so key to your MO right there. Is like not only are you sad and disappointed, like to reinforce that feeling.
I could keep saying the same thing because that's my only answer. I could come up with different stuff, but like it's inconsequential compared to how strong I feel about that.
100%. So let me give you what I would like to see from the lineups. This is, as I have said now 16 times, this is like a big moment for this team. Yeah, I won't. I don't think you should fully waste the lineup on testing people, but I want some of that in there because otherwise a friendly is a waste. So I have like a mix of both for both these teams of guys that I think should be tested, guys I think should be given opportunities, as well as the best players on the field and the best opportunities.
Hear it?
The first thing is Gio Reyna, not a part of this group. He has been sent back to Dortmund with an injury. Cade Cowell has been called up in his place. That's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for him, and we are entering the like John O'Brien conversation of Stuart Holden of like, will this guy ever be healthy? Will he be healthy, consistent enough to get minutes and like become the player we know he's capable of? Because when he is healthy, he has performed already. It's not potential, like it is realized quality on the field. So that one, that's already a player out of the starting lineup, and I think heartbreaking for him and for a lot of fans. Going into this one, I'm going to start at the back. I got Matt Turner in goal. I will go Joe Scally at right back. I am going Chris Richards and Mark McKenzie at center back. And I'm going Caleb Wiley at left back. So it is 3 starters at their spot. Serginho Dest, of course, still injured. And then 2 players where Caleb Wiley's potential, where you're testing him, and Mark McKenzie is, you talked about, Berhalter had his guys, and other guys now get a chance. I think McKenzie's at the top of that list. Made the league on transfer for him, played well in Belgium. Give him a chance to prove that he could be the guy in this convo because that spot hasn't been good enough.
Yeah, I think in your back line here, like back up, left back behind Jedi Robinson and center back next to Chris Richards, between the names that have, Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, Austin Trusty. And, Ream, I think, would probably still be the best center back in this team, but, like, he's 36. And so we're constantly going to ask that question every single camp of, is he still got it? Is he still at this level? Is he still at this level? So, yes, center back depth chart is super fluid right now. So, to your point, like, I think it'd be good to throw out Mark McKenzie.
In midfield, you obviously no Tyler Adams, no Mark McKenzie, no Gio Reyna in this group. So I would go, I think, with Johnny, with Yunus Musa, and with Malik Tillman as my 3, assuming we're going to see the 4-3-3 like what Greg Berhalter did. The other big name would be Aiden Morris, which I would like to see. But if you play a 10 in this group, then you're only playing 2 deeper midfielders. To me, Musa should always be on the field because he's great at soccer. And you're basically between Johnny and Aiden Morris for that other spot.
Yeah, Aiden Morris has been so good for Burrow. Strength to strength coming from the Columbus Crew. Start the season. Be cool to see him rewarded with a start, but to your point, like, I think the priority would be Johnny Cardoso and Yunus Musa. And then, like, if you put in 8, like, those 3 players, like, there is no real, like, you could try to have Yunus Musa do a job moving forward, but that's not at his best, and that's not a role that he'll play when the team's at full strength. So I agree with you there. Malik Tillman, that's an interesting one, about, like, is he a 90-minute player? Like, he's one of those guys that, like, what's his best position? Is it attacking midfield? Is it kind of playing inverted, like as a wide forward? Like, is it like, it's almost as if he'd be best in like a, Red Bull Leipzig 4-2-2-2 as like one of the attacking mids where it's like he's not quite a winger, not quite a 10, not quite a forward, but just, good at a lot of things. It's interesting here that like feels like Luca Della Torre just completely passed over. Like I was doing this, I'm writing a piece about the World Cup roster watch, and I was like, all right, I had 10 locks for that team, 6 more or less locks. And then a lot of people on the bubble. And, like, I'd look at Della Torre on the bubble because I was like, I don't think that he's guaranteed a spot at the World Cup right now. And, like, I think that has more to do with how strong that this midfield group has gotten beyond the starters. because it had been like, oh, Luca Del Torre is like an overqualified backup rotation, like with Brendan Aronson as well. But now with Tanner Tessman coming through, Aiden Morris, Johnny Cardoso, Malik Tillman, all these guys, like it's going to be really competitive to get on that roster.
And I think one of the issues for him, so to be clear, I don't know how this team's going to play. I don't know how they're going to play going forward. So like it might be a 4-4-2, which would make sense with the talent that's available. He is not like a perfect fit. Yeah, he is not like a perfect fit as a replacement for anyone in this group because it doesn't play the same way. And so, like if a coach is looking to change things, and we're hoping it's Pochettino, and maybe that's how he gets his way into this group. But like he, for talent and resume, deserves to be in it, and yet you don't ever really know when he should be on the field. And like, oh, if Musa misses a game, if Weston McKennie misses a game, you plug Luca Del Torre in. Well, then you kind of have to change the way you play, and like that's not something that national teams are always great at. And so sometimes players get elevated over you who are better like for like changes or can do things like that. My front three, if it is a front three with this group, obviously no Timothy Weah in this squad. I want to see Ballo up top. He finished out Copa America the best he's played for the U.S. Pulisic's going to be on the field because Pulisic's always going to be on the field. And then that's where this gets tough because I think if Gio Reyna was in, maybe Tillman plays out here. I think Josh Sargent deserves to be on the field, but I wouldn't play him out wide right.
Yeah.
And so you get into a tough spot of like who's on the field, who gets the opportunity. That's where this might be Tillman. The other option would be, Pulisic on the right and Haji Wright on the left, which I could see happen with this group as well. And that's the one that I would like put down and say, this is what I want to see / expect to see.
Yeah, I agree. And it is tough for Josh Sargent. Like, again, like I think that he would have gotten the first chance to start at Copa America if he was fit. Unfortunately, he was still dealing with an injury, so didn't. And now, like, again, he started off really, really well with Norwich, but Balogun played well at the Copa America. And as you said, I think that's the best form he's been in that we've seen over the last year or so, or whatever, right? So I think that he should be rewarded with a start. And, like, I think that Sargent deserves to as well, but I don't see a scenario we can play the both of them. Like maybe Balogun could play like on the left as like the Haji Wright like wide forward role, or like even more of a wide forward because Haji Wright does a lot of good winger stuff as well. But like then like you might be getting too cute, right? And it's like, all right, is this a role that we're gonna see him in the future of the national team? Probably not. So kind of what's the point? But yeah, so it's just tough. Not enough places for all the guys deserving to start.
So that's our 11 for the U.S. For Canada, it's a little bit more straightforward because we've seen Jesse coach this team because of the success they had at Copa America. Max Crepeau is the starter in goal. That seems pretty obvious.
This is forehead recovered from headbutting Mason Toy.
Yeah. Did you love that or did you not like that?
I go back and forth. I think it's a hilarious video. I think if I was Mason Toy, I would have immediately been like cursing. Like, dude, what is wrong with you? But I respect it.
Yeah.
Just a lot of vibes, guys being dudes, just headbutting each other, and let's move on.
It's big NFL energy for the opening of NFL season.
Yes.
I wouldn't be shocked if Max has a few CFL dreams in his back pocket that he wished he was a Montreal Alouette one day and was playing that out on the field. If you haven't seen it, Maxime Crepeau plays on Mason Toy's team. They're teammates, and he headbutted Mason Toy
in celebration. Excitement. They weren't arguing.
Yeah. No, not at all. It was all positive. And Mason gives him a look after of like, dude, get out of my face. Never do that again.
Mason Toy had to come off because his nose is bleeding. And the referee was like, you need to go off the field now.
He's like, no, it's fine. It's my teammate. I'm good. It doesn't count.
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood. Michel.
So, Knicks legend, of course, Ben Stiller. So in goal, we've got Maxime Crepeau. You've got the French connection at center back now. Derek Cornelius, who plays at Marseille. And Moise Bombito, who plays at Nice, which is insane to say about this team. Like 2 Ligue 1 players at center back in their prime or entering their prime for this Canadian national team. I want to see Alphonso Davies on the left. I want him to be established as a left back on this team. So that's where I want to see him start. And Alistair Johnston, I think, is still the starter at right back for this team. I don't think he lost that spot. He is the model of consistency. That's who he is. And his ability to rotate in, if you can push Fonzie up, I think is a big part of the future for this Canadian national team. Any big pushback here?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to reiterating things that we've talked about, we're in reruns, but like my feeling is Alphonso Davies should be playing further forward for this national team. But Jesse Marsch has felt differently, mostly.
Yeah,
and I know obviously you do. So that's just that's my piece.
There's just 2 guys from New Jersey disagreeing: Jesse Marsch, Princeton grad, and Kane University.
Attaboy. You got it right.
There you go. I got the pronunciation right at the last second. Midfield is the interesting part for Canada. Steven Eustachio is obviously locked in central midfield. No Sampiet in this camp. We saw Jonathan Osorio get a ton of starts in Copa America, which I was happy about. I thought he was the best performer there. He is not a true ball winner, but he's scrappy and he will do anything for the Canadian flag. Like he would lay down in front of a train. So that's what I wanted in there in Copa America.
He would take a headbutt from Maxime Crépeau every game.
He would probably be one that would do it himself. He'd be like, "Oh, cool, we're headbutting now. I didn't realize we were talking Canada." Trailer Park Boys over there. So but I want to see tests in this. So I think Ali Ahmed for me is locked in starter in central midfield. He brings something they need. I want to see Nico Segur in here, the Croatian Canadian young player, 20 years old, that has decided on Canada and brought into this team. If you get him in training and you decide he's not ready and you don't want to risk it, then you go Matthew Choinière in this spot. Like he has just made the move to Europe. He is part of your future. You have to know, I think, over the next year, if guys like this are depth pieces or they can really be starters for you and be difference makers. So those are my three midfielders for this group. And then you go to the front line, you've got Jonathan David and Kyle Larin, who are always going to lock in starts for this team. And Jacob Schaffelberg deserves to keep a spot that he earned. Like it's not like he's 35 and won't be there at a World Cup. I think there's a ceiling to how much he can affect the team and how good he can be. But like he earned it at Copa America. And that's part of a coaching staff, is making sure players understand that like they've got a chance. And if they play the right way and they do the right things, that they can have a future in your program. And I think it would be tough to take a spot away from Schaffelberg.
Yeah, I think you're right. And like his profile, like again, Liam Miller, like maybe, but like Schaffelberg's pace and ability to get vertical, I think helps Jonathan David and Kyle Larin, or at least in theory, should give them more space. So like I don't think that there's another profile quite like his, because I don't think people match his pace. But like you said, like there is a ceiling here. So there's drawbacks with everything in these selections. So like maybe you could get more from a different player, but you're going to lose the pace and kind of go on from there. So I agree with you. I would start Schaffelberg, particularly if we assume that the United States are going to try to play with the ball, because I know Canada like playing in transition as well, or like Jesse Marsh style, then Schaffelberg's pace I think is even more important.
And I think it's, playing in an MLS stadium in Kansas City, like it'll be a comfortable experience for him. Liam Miller just changed clubs. He started well with Hull, but he struggled at Copa America. And I think he struggles in that whole setup of like against the ball, constantly pressing, not getting a lot of touches to get comfortable in a game, where Schaffelberg's like, just ping one at me every once in a while and I'll light up and be ready to go.
You sent it 25 yards past me. Okay, I mean,
Yeah. No, don't play me the ball. Play the ball to the other team and I'll chase after it. And we'll see what happens.
Let me press somebody.
All right. That's all for us here. We're looking forward to the game. We'll have the recap, obviously, next Tuesday. That will be going into that New Zealand game as well. There are MLS games this weekend, so we'll talk all about that. I'll have my Monday recap show. Then we'll have our Tuesday show as well coming out of it. I do want to throw in here, Juan Garcia, who's been on fire in the chat, did throw a name in for elevating into the superstar chat that we should have added, Juki Lozano. He's already officially been signed.
Good call. Yeah.
The expectation will be that he will perform at that level. Whether he does so or not, you never know. But if he's got a manager like me, maybe you can draw it out of him. Maybe you can get a top-tier performance like I get from Tom every single time. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here, Tom. Thank you to everyone for watching live. And we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.